I was having a conversation this week with an elderly friend who lost his wife in the past year. And he asked me if I believed in heaven and if I thought that we saw people after our death that we had lost. And I assured him that I do believe in heaven, and I do believe that we are reunited with people. But even as I was saying it, there's always just that slightest little doubt inside that you don't usually admit out loud. And it's like, well, I think I believe it. Maybe I believe it. It would be easier to believe it had I ever actually seen God, or maybe seen somebody who went to heaven and came back, but I have not done either one. When I came home after having this conversation, the Torah portion was on my computer, and as I read it, I thought, once again, God is telling me what he needs me to know. And this was the Torah portion. It was just a few days ago. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. And he said, show me, I pray, thy glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before thee, and you will proclaim the name of the Lord before thee. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. And he said, thou canst not see my face, for man shall not see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon the rock, and it shall come to pass, while my glory pass by, that I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand until I have passed by. And I will take away my hand, and thou shalt see my back, but my face shall not be seen. Like everyone else, I have often felt like Moses, and discovered that Moses felt like me, and thought that faith would be much easier if we could just see God. This bit of scripture has always puzzled me. God was asking a great deal of Moses, and all Moses asked in return was to see his face. God said no, because man could not see him and live. He then made provisions for Moses to see his back after he passed by. It never made sense to me that it was all right for Moses to see God's back, but not his face. What difference was there? I think that I never understood the whole passage because my interpretation of it was much too literal and too childlike. I saw God in a very human form, and it seemed silly that Moses could view one side of him, but not the other. Sometimes revelations are a bit slow in coming to me. This one took about 45 years. When I read this, I realized that I had made two mistakes on all the other occasions that I read this Torah portion. The first was in isolating Moses seeing God's back from what God had said earlier in the passage. The second was in thinking that God actually has a face and back, just like we do. When Moses asked to see God, God said that he would show him the goodness he had done, the graciousness and the mercy he had shown, but not his face. In other words, God said he would reveal his past workings to Moses. When he refused to reveal his face, it wasn't a human face that he was withholding, but rather knowledge of the future. When God said man could not see his face and live, what he may possibly have meant was that man could not see the future and live. That made so much more sense. Think of what your life would have been like if you had always been aware of what was waiting in your future. Could you have lived like you did? Probably not. I thought about one of the worst days of my life when my 11-year-old daughter was hit by a drunk driver who ran off the road while she was riding her bicycle on her driveway. If I had known that was going to happen when she was an infant, think about what that knowledge would have done to me in the 11 years that I was waiting for that awful event to happen. Wouldn't it have changed her upbringing and my relationship with her? Think of the people you've lost in your life. Can you imagine the burden of knowing beforehand how and when they would die? Think about your accomplishments. Think about your failures. How much effort would you have put into either one of them if you already knew what the outcome was going to be? Childhood lessons die very hard. The result of my Sunday school years was a concept of God as a human father in a long white robe who had the power to do whatever he pleased. My thoughts on what God is have evolved over the years to a much broader and more sophisticated scope, but at the base of it all, there's still the kindly old man in the flowing robes. Perhaps what God actually is just pure, total knowledge. Knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. Knowledge of how and why everything happens the way it does. There are no havens of darkness in God's knowledge. Who among us would be able to handle that? God in his infinite wisdom is probably not making faith harder for us by hiding his face. More likely, he is protecting us from a burden that he alone is strong enough to bear. God told us that he would be seen in his creation and good works. They define him. I think he also expects the same from us. It's time for us to concentrate more on the good works that we can do and worry less about where God is and what he looks like. If we can do that, the questions of faith will most likely resolve themselves.